And it is the election panel between now and about 20 to 7 this week, joined by Antony, Carpen, and also Dan Greef as well. Welcome to you both, gentlemen.
Hello,
Good evening.
I'm trying to remember, you've both been on this, were you both on at the beginning of the
Yeah, I think the
season?
first show we
Same
were on
one
together.
Yeah, I thought so.
Phil was here too then.
Kind of, yeah, we'll hopefully have Phil back with us next week to wrap things up before the elections, because we're only 8 days away from it all. And it's very strange. I have had so little election literature.
Perhaps certainly the Greens have been posting photographs on social media of them campaigning in Petersfield. The candidate for the Greens is Sharon Corr, and I think it's Councillor Robertson who's defending the seat for Labour. I believe.
He is indeed, yes. So that's could be. It's we make these things. It's what makes elections.
But what this
really,
is, Julian, and to listeners, is this is perhaps an example of where the local political parties target individual seats throughout the city rather than having a blanket approach across the city. So what you'll find is that there will be some wards which will be flooded with literature because it's going to be a very close call.
Well, I guess a step forward market, I suppose, with that
Absolutely.
one, isn't it? Which is a three-way battle, effectively.
Absolutely.
And
Whereas
a very interesting one too.
Absolutely. Whereas if you look at a ward, let's say Cherry Hinton, and speaking to a couple of people there recently, they've said that, well, they've had absolutely nothing. The other issue there with Cherry Hinton is it's the current mayor of Cambridge, Councillor Rob Dryden, who is standing for election. But because he's the mayor, there's a very limited amount of media activity that he can do because of the restrictions that he has as mayor.
This is quite interesting, actually, because we've got, as you probably know, on Friday night we're doing coverage of the Cambridge band competition. It's
Absolutely.
the final. We'll be there and cover it live. And Councillor Dryden is going to. Actually, technically, he's not a councillor, is he? Under the rules, anyway. You know what I mean. The mayor of Cambridge, Robert Dryden, will be there. And our election rule. Now, normally, if you're doing something like this, I would have to quickly find all the other candidates to interview alongside him. However, in his role as the mayor, I could quite happily interview him about his choice of music, what he thought of the bands, but obviously say nothing at all about politics.
But also, again, the people I've spoken to in Cherry Hinton are saying that they haven't seen the other parties actively canvassing. I think with the exception, again, of the candidate for the Greens, Caitlin, and I forget Caitlin's surname now, who I filmed a video for, because I've been doing this video project trying to get on film as many of the candidates from all of the parties on video.
Are they all willing to take part?
It varies, and I've got some interesting findings looking at the data, because it's not really party specific. Again, with the exception of the Greens. It's basically where if the candidates are women from minority ethnic backgrounds or are not incumbents, they're more likely to want to make videos. And interestingly, I've been in touch with 4 candidates from the Labour Party in South Cambridgeshire who've expressed interest in making videos, 2 of which I've actually made them for. And they are all challenging for seats outside in South Cambridgeshire. And it seems to be where if the candidate is an incumbent or an older, whiter male, they're less likely to want to have videos made. So it's really interesting.
It's almost a reflection. I don't know what you think about this, Dan, but it's almost a reflection of the party leader debates which we got last year, when the debate goes on between the broadcasters, and which is effectively, if you're the Prime Minister, you don't particularly care to have a debate with anybody. Thank you very much, and you go your best to try and avoid it if possible. It applies to all Prime Ministers, whoever they are. And if you're the challenger, somebody coming in the way, for the sake of argument, Cameron was against Brown all those years ago, you take a slightly different view.
Well, I think maybe slightly mixing the issue slightly there, because when it came to those TV debates, of course, I think Cameron was trying to keep away from the headlines and trying to control his message. So it's a bit different that way.
If you're leader of the opposition to if you're the Prime Minister, it's kind of
that's true. But he did kind of change his opinion from 2010. I don't think it was completely because of his new job as Prime Minister. I suspect there's something else going on there as well. When it comes, I think, to what we see here. In South Cambridgeshire, Antony's very kindly filmed 2 of the candidates for South Cambridgeshire and the district elections there as well. is that actually people are probably more willing to embrace new media if they're new to the system. If they're new to politics, to local politics, they're campaigning for maybe, the first time. I think they're more willing to try all types of avenues, whereas maybe somebody's maybe more well established is using the kind of tried and tested approach, which has probably worked for them in the past, so why would they have to change? And I think that's what it is.
Listen to him. Our good friend Phil Rogers at the start of the campaign, once all the candidates had been announced, kindly popped up a list of the Twitter handles of all of those taking part. And it does follow this similar sort of pattern to what Antony was describing. If for the sake of, I'm going to go into stereotypes here, so I apologise in advance. But if you're, a white, crusty old male, the chances are you're not going to be on Twitter. If you're a young Asian woman going in for the first time, a woman of any persuasion for that matter, then you're going to be signing up for social media and using it as a vehicle to get your message. It's not strictly true. There's older men on Twitter. There's older women on Twitter.
Well, I think you're right. I think it also comes down. The handles are interesting because I think personally the best ones are when people will have their own name. And that is what they're standing as, not councillor so-and-so or candidate for. It's better just to have their name, and that means that they're standing up with their own name saying, I'm the candidate.
PCC CAMS or whatever.
Well, I could see what I was going for, but actually there's something to be said for just being the person, because it's human and people connect with it. I suspect what will happen is that Twitter and things will pick up. I mean, 2015 was probably the first general election where social media was such a big part of what happened. And that's from talking to candidates in 2010, like Sebastian Kingsley, who said it's a completely different election for him. The emails were so much more in quantity than previously. Twitter was bigger, Facebook was bigger, and it's going to get bigger and bigger from there on in. And I think videos are a natural way, and in fact Nick Clegg used this technique very, very effectively, although unfortunately didn't go so well for his party, when he said he would do a video of 30, 40 seconds just to get out where he was, what he was doing, what he was saying. And I thought that's fantastic. You really get a sense of, a feel for the campaign they're running and what they're doing.
But it's interesting also that having taken on board Phil's list is that actually there's not a great deal, or at least as far as I can see, there's not a great deal of Twitter action on subjects from very few. There's a lot of here's a great time, here's a nice to see the support coming out whilst we've been campaigning kind of tweets. But there's not in its most basic form, vote for me and I'll sort out the parking on your street.
Mind you, I mean, Antony's more of an expert on this than I am. I just wonder if that's what works, because actually the beauty of social media is that you are able to connect with people on a personal level. So I think personally, seeing that people are out in your neighbourhood trying to meet you and listen to what you've got to say is really very powerful. Just someone sort of preaching at you this, that and the other. I think the website's good for that. I think the manifestos, I'm sure we'll talk about later today, are a good place to look for that as well. And people do find those things. If you look at my website from the last election, the spike in about 3 days before the election was through the roof as people were finding this information. But actually to know that you are somebody who's active in your community, who cares, who's there day in, day out, when it's raining, they're still out there campaigning, I think that has a big impact, because ultimately we're probably influenced more by our friends and our social groups, and that ties into that way of communicating nowadays than necessarily we are by just getting a small kind of piece of the manifesto tweeted to us.
Because one other thing to mention, and I'm looking at the numbers, the statistics behind who's been watching which videos. One of the issues that often comes up is trying to encourage more women certainly into politics and covering what
encourage
we do.
more women onto this programme, actually, for that matter.
Well, certainly, if there are any women out there who want to take my place, please do. That'd be splendid.
Yes, we'd like to replace that. No, we wouldn't like to replace Antony. But
well, there is a spare chair, so
I guess so.
But just to show, it's Sophie Barnett of the Romsey Labour Party standing in Romsey Ward who has by far got the most views for her short message, and it was only a 20-second message, but she's had over 100 views in the past week or two. In third place is Sharon Corr of the Greens with 69. In fourth place is Rosie Moore of the Coleridge Labour Party, standing where I live, going for the Dragon Ferry vote there, with 64 views. So I mean, looking at, in particular, the past 7 days, the statistics on the local videos that I've been filming, so these include the Queen Edith's hustings, over 1,000 views in 7 days.
That's pretty impressive. And picking up on Dan's point, I guess when we're sitting here this time next week, taking a look at what's been said, to see if there is more both numbers increased for your videos, Anthony, and also to see if there is any additional traffic which is coming out from those people on who are on Twitter and are trying to get messages across.